Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us for the second part of our story. Let's jump right back in. Mikey Middleton's office smelled like stale cigarettes and cheap coffee, but his information was worth more than gold. Robert sat across from the private investigator's cluttered desk, studying photographs and bank records that painted a picture of betrayal more extensive than he'd imagined. They've been sloppy as hell, Mikey said, spreading documents across his desk. Your wife opened a separate bank account 6 months ago. She's been transferring money from your joint account in small amounts, 200 to 300 at a time. Nothing that would trigger automatic alerts, but it adds up. Robert studied the bank statements. Over 6 months, Teresa had siphoned nearly $15,000. What's she spending it on? Motel rooms mostly, but also this. Mikey slid a jewelry store receipt across the desk. She bought David Monroe a Rolex 2 weeks ago. $1,700. Robert's jaw tightened. He'd given Teresa access to their accounts because he trusted her. The watch purchase was particularly galling. Robert had been wearing the same Timex for 8 years. There's more, Mikey continued. Phone records show they've been texting constantly. Hundreds of messages. I managed to retrieve some of them. He handed Robert a folder. It's not just an affair, Robert. They're planning a life together. The text messages were even more damning than the emails Lily had found. Teresa and David had discussed travel plans, looked at houses in other states, and even researched how to transfer money internationally. Most chilling was a series of texts from the week before Lily's accident. Teresa, he suspects something. Asked me why I was gone so long yesterday. David, we need to be more careful. Teresa, or we need to speed up our timeline. I'm tired of living a lie. David, what about Lily? Teresa, she graduates in 6 months. We could be gone by summer. David, what about Robert? Teresa, construction accidents happen all the time. His life insurance would solve all our problems. Robert set down the folder with steady hands, though inside he was burning with rage. Mikey, I need you to keep digging. I want to know every detail of their plan. Robert, this is evidence of a conspiracy. You should take this to the police. Not yet. Robert's voice was calm, controlled. I need them to make a move first. I need them to try something. Mikey frowned. That's dangerous, buddy. These people are talking about killing you. They're talking. They haven't acted. Robert stood to leave. Keep watching them. I want to know every move they make. Robert's next stop was the law office of Kevin Horton. The attorney reviewed Mikey's evidence with professional interest, making notes on a legal pad. This is solid evidence of adultery and conspiracy, Kevin said. With this, we can probably get you everything in a divorce settlement. I don't want a divorce settlement, Robert replied. I want them destroyed. Kevin looked up sharply. Robert, I understand you're angry, but they plan to murder me, Kevin. My wife has been stealing money from our accounts to fund her affair. They discussed my death like it was a business transaction. Robert's voice remained steady, but his eyes were cold. I want legal destruction. I want them to lose everything. What exactly are you thinking? Robert outlined his plan. It was complex, requiring precise timing and careful manipulation, but it would be thorough. Kevin listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly concerned. Robert, what you're describing is elaborate and potentially dangerous. They made it dangerous when they decided I was expendable, Robert replied. Are you with me or not? Kevin studied his old friend for a long moment. You're not the same man who helped me renovate my office. No, Robert agreed. I'm not. That evening, Robert returned to the hospital to find Lily's room full of visitors. Several of her friends from school had come by along with Beatrice Monroe, who was arranging a bouquet of flowers. Mr. Hayes. Beatrice rose to greet him, her face bright with sympathy. I hope you don't mind us visiting. The girls wanted to see Lily. Robert surveyed the room. Lily's friends, Caitlin Harris, Jody Moody, and Dana Singleton, sat around the bed talking softly to his unconscious daughter. Teresa was chatting with Beatrice near the window. Of course not, Robert said. Lily would love knowing her friends are here. As the girls said their goodbyes, promising to return soon, Robert noticed Caitlin lingering near Lily's bed. She glanced around to make sure the adults weren't watching, then leaned close to Lily's ear and whispered something. When she straightened, her eyes met Robert's across the room. Mr. Hayes, could I talk to you for a minute? Robert joined Caitlin in the hallway while the others remained in Lily's room. The 17-year-old looked nervous, twisting her hands as she spoke. Lily was really upset about something the last few weeks, Caitlin said quietly. She wouldn't tell me what it was, but she said she'd found out something terrible about someone she trusted. Robert's pulse quickened. Did she say anything else? She asked me if I thought people could change. Like if someone you thought was good could actually be really bad. Caitlin's eyes filled with tears. I should have pushed her to tell me more. Maybe if she talked about it, she wouldn't have been so distracted when she was driving. Robert placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. Caitlin, what happened to Lily isn't your fault. Sometimes adults put burdens on kids that they shouldn't have to carry. She did say one thing, Caitlin continued. She said she had evidence of something and she didn't know whether to tell her dad or handle it herself. I told her she should always trust her dad. That was good advice, Robert said softly. As Caitlin rejoined her friends, Robert felt something shift inside his chest. Lily had been struggling with the knowledge of her mother's betrayal, trying to protect him while carrying the burden alone. She'd been distracted enough while driving to get hit by a drunk driver. In that moment, Robert Hayes stopped thinking about justice or revenge. He started thinking about war. When he returned to Lily's room, Beatrice Monroe was saying goodbye to Teresa. I'll call you tomorrow about dinner plans, she said warmly. David is looking forward to helping however we can. After the visitors left, Robert sat beside his daughter's bed, taking her hand in his. I found your note, sweetheart, he whispered. And I found what you left for me at school. You don't have to worry anymore. Daddy's going to handle everything. For the first time in days, Lily's fingers moved slightly in his grip. Robert smiled grimly. His daughter was coming back, and when she woke up, the people who had hurt their family would already be destroyed. Lily Hayes opened her eyes on a Tuesday morning, exactly 7 days after her accident. Robert was alone with her when it happened, having sent Teresa home to shower and change clothes. The moment his daughter's eyes focused on his face, Robert knew she remembered everything. Dad. Lily's voice was hoarse from the breathing tube that had been removed the day before. I'm here, sweetheart. Did you find my note? Robert squeezed her hand gently. I found it. I found everything. Lily's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I didn't know how. You have nothing to apologize for, Robert said firmly. You were protecting me and you were brave. But now it's my turn to protect you. What are you going to do? Robert smiled, and Lily saw something in her father's expression that she'd never seen before. Something cold and final. I'm going to handle it. Dr. Evans arrived an hour later, followed shortly by Teresa, who burst into tears at seeing Lily awake and alert. Robert watched his wife embrace their daughter, noting how Lily's body stiffened slightly at the contact. How do you feel, baby? Teresa asked, stroking Lily's hair. Tired, Lily replied simply. And my head hurts. As Dr. Evans explained Lily's recovery timeline, at least another week in the hospital, followed by months of physical therapy. Robert's phone buzzed with a text from Mikey Middleton. They're meeting at the Riverside Motel, room 237. Now, Robert excused himself to take a business call, walking out to his truck in the hospital parking lot. Instead of calling Mikey back, he drove straight to the motel. The Riverside was Oakwood's shabbiest accommodation, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. Robert parked where he could see the second-floor walkway and waited. 20 minutes later, David Monroe's silver Honda pulled into the lot. Robert watched his wife's lover climb the stairs to room 237, key already in hand. They'd done this so many times it was routine. Robert waited another 10 minutes, then walked up to room 237 and knocked. Who is it? David's voice was muffled through the door. Maintenance, Robert replied, disguising his voice slightly. Need to check the water pressure. The door opened, and David Monroe found himself face to face with the husband of his lover. David was shirtless, his hair disheveled, his face going white with shock. Robert, what are you? Robert pushed past David into the room. Teresa was in the bed, pulling a sheet up to cover herself, her face a mask of terror. Interesting, Robert said calmly, pulling out his phone and taking pictures. Very interesting. Robert, let me explain, Teresa started. No need, Robert interrupted. I understand completely. You two have been planning my death so you can run away together with my insurance money. You've been stealing from our accounts. You've been conducting this affair while our daughter fought for her life in the hospital. David stepped forward, his hands raised placatingly. Robert, please, we can work this out. Robert turned to face David, and the teacher took an involuntary step backward. Can we? Because I've read the emails, David. I've seen the text messages. I know about the watch, the travel plans, the discussions about convenient construction accidents. Teresa was crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. Robert, please. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far, Robert replied. And now Lily knows. She's been carrying the knowledge of your betrayal for weeks. She was so upset about it that she wasn't paying attention when she was driving. You can't blame us for her accident, David protested. Robert's expression didn't change, but something in his voice made both of them freeze. I can blame you for whatever I want, and I can do whatever I decide is appropriate. He pulled out a manila envelope and tossed it onto the bed between them. Divorce papers, Teresa. You're getting nothing. The house, the business, Lily's college fund, it's all mine. And David, your wife is going to be very interested in these photos. David lunged forward, reaching for the envelope, but Robert caught his wrist and twisted it behind his back with the easy strength of someone who'd spent 20 years in construction. David gasped in pain as Robert applied pressure. Don't touch what isn't yours, Robert said quietly. You should have learned that lesson months ago. He released David, who stumbled backward, cradling his wrist. You have 24 hours to tell your respective spouses or I will. And David, I'd start looking for a new job. The school board is going to be very interested in hearing about your relationship with a student's mother. Robert walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and that insurance policy you two were so interested in? I canceled it yesterday. So, if you're still thinking about arranging an accident, you'd better think again. He left them sitting in the motel room, Teresa sobbing and David staring at the envelope like it contained a death sentence. It did. Robert drove back to the hospital, his hands steady on the wheel, his heart rate normal. The first phase was complete. Now David and Teresa would panic, make mistakes, and try to salvage something from their wreckage, and Robert would be waiting for them. When he returned to Lily's room, his daughter looked up at him with knowing eyes. Is it done? It started, Robert replied, taking her hand. How are you feeling? Better, Lily said, and for the first time in a week she smiled. The next morning brought chaos to Robert Hayes's carefully ordered world, but it was the kind of chaos he'd engineered. His phone started ringing at 6 a.m. with a call from Beatrice Monroe, her voice shaking with rage and disbelief. You son of a bitch, she said without preamble. What kind of game are you playing? Robert was drinking coffee in his kitchen, having left Lily and Teresa's care for the night. Good morning, Beatrice. I take it David told you. He told me you've been harassing them, making accusations. I showed them photographs, Robert interrupted calmly. Would you like to see them? The line went quiet for a long moment. When Beatrice spoke again, her voice was different. Smaller, more vulnerable. How long? 6 months minimum, probably longer. Robert heard what sounded like something breaking in the background. Then Beatrice's voice again, stronger now. That lying piece of... that two-faced liar. Beatrice, we should meet. We have some things to discuss. Oh, we're going to discuss more than things, she replied grimly. Where? They met at a diner on the outskirts of town, away from prying eyes and wagging tongues. Beatrice Monroe looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled. Her eyes were red from crying and lack of sleep. Show me, she said without preamble. Robert slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs, bank statements, email printouts, and hotel receipts. Beatrice went through them methodically, her expression growing harder with each piece of evidence. $1,700 for a watch, she said finally. With my grandmother's money. Money he told me he needed for school supplies. I'm sorry, Beatrice. She looked up at him sharply. Are you? Because you don't look sorry. You look like a man who's getting exactly what he wanted. Robert studied her face. Beatrice Monroe was intelligent, wealthy, and now thoroughly betrayed. She was also, he realized, potentially very dangerous to his wife and David. What do you want from them? He asked. Everything, Beatrice replied without hesitation. I want David to lose his job, his reputation, his future. I want your wife to lose her family, her home, her security. I want them both to understand what it feels like to lose everything you thought you could count on. Robert nodded slowly. I can help with that. Why would you help me? Because they made a mistake when they involved my daughter in their plans. Lily found evidence of their affair and has been carrying that burden for weeks. She was distracted while driving because of what they put her through. Beatrice's expression softened slightly. How is Lily? Awake, recovering, and old enough to testify about what she discovered if this goes to court. They spent the next hour planning. Beatrice had resources Robert lacked. Social connections, political influence, and old money's ability to open doors that stayed closed to working-class contractors. Robert had documentation, investigative skills, and a personal understanding of both David and Teresa's weaknesses. The school board meets Thursday night, Beatrice said. My family has donated enough money to Oakwood High that they'll listen when I request David's termination. I can provide evidence of his relationship with a student's parent. That should be enough for immediate dismissal. What about your wife? Robert's smile was cold. Teresa is about to discover that stealing $15,000 from joint accounts constitutes felony theft. She's also going to learn that conspiracy to commit murder, even just discussing it, can be prosecuted under Michigan law. Beatrice raised an eyebrow. You've been busy. I've been thorough. As they prepared to leave, Beatrice placed a hand on Robert's arm. I want you to know, I had no idea. If you'd known what David was doing, you would have done what any reasonable person would do, Robert replied. The problem is that David and Teresa stopped being reasonable the moment they decided I was expendable. That afternoon, Robert returned to the hospital to find Teresa pacing Lily's room like a caged animal. Their daughter was sleeping, finally off the strongest pain medications. "We need to talk," Teresa said the moment Robert entered. "I thought we covered everything yesterday at the motel." Teresa flinched. "Robert, please. I know I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" Robert kept his voice low, mindful of their sleeping daughter. "Teresa, you planned my murder. You stole money from our accounts. You conducted a 6-month affair while I was working to build a future for our family. I never meant for it to go that far. The things in those emails, they were just fantasies. We never would have actually hurt you." Robert studied his wife's face. She was lying, but he could see that she'd started to believe her own lies. "It doesn't matter what you meant. It matters what you did." "What about Lily? Are you going to destroy her family because of my mistakes?" "You destroyed her family when you chose David Monroe over your marriage vows." Robert's voice was steady, final. "I'm just cleaning up the wreckage." Teresa collapsed into a chair, her face in her hands. "What do you want? What will it take for you to forgive me?" Robert looked at his wife, really looked at her for what he knew would be the last time as anything other than an enemy. She was still beautiful, still the woman he'd fallen in love with 23 years ago, but that woman had been replaced by someone who could casually discuss his death over lunch. "There's nothing you can do," he said quietly. "This marriage is over. Tomorrow you'll be served with divorce papers. The day after that you'll be arrested for theft and conspiracy. And sometime next week, you'll discover that your boyfriend has been fired and his wife has filed for divorce." Teresa looked up at him with desperate eyes. "Robert, please. The only reason you're not in jail right now is because I don't want Lily to wake up to that chaos. But make no mistake, Teresa, you're finished." Lily stirred in her bed, her eyes opening slowly. "Dad? Mom, what's wrong?" Robert moved to his daughter's side, taking her hand. "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. Your mother was just leaving." Teresa stood slowly, understanding that she was being dismissed from her own daughter's life. At the door, she turned back one last time. "I did love you," she said. "Both of you." "No," Robert replied. "You loved what we could give you. There's a difference." After Teresa left, Lily squeezed her father's hand. "Are you okay, Dad?" Robert looked down at his daughter, his brave, intelligent daughter, who tried to protect him even while carrying the weight of terrible knowledge. "I'm exactly where I need to be." 3 months later, Robert Hayes stood in Oakwood's courthouse, watching as the judge handed down David Monroe's sentence. 6 months in county jail for conspiracy and theft, followed by 2 years of probation. David's teaching license had been permanently revoked. His marriage to Beatrice was over, and his reputation in Oakwood was destroyed beyond repair. Teresa's sentencing had been the week before, 8 months for felony theft and conspiracy to commit murder. The prosecution had been thorough, presenting evidence of the stolen money, the murder plots, and the systematic betrayal of her family. She'd entered a plea deal, hoping for leniency, but the judge had been unimpressed by her tears and apologies. Robert felt no satisfaction watching his wife's lover led away in handcuffs. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about consequences. Some foundations were so rotten that they had to be completely removed before new construction could begin. Lily was waiting for him in the courthouse hallway, walking with only a slight limp now. The doctor said she'd make a full recovery, though she'd always have some scars from the accident. Robert thought those scars might serve as useful reminders about the importance of choosing who to trust. "How do you feel?" Lily asked as they walked toward the parking lot. "Like it's over," Robert replied honestly. "How do you feel?" "Free," Lily said after a moment. "I know that sounds terrible, but I feel free." Robert understood. They were both free now. Free from the lies, the deception, and the slow poison of a marriage built on false foundations. It had been expensive freedom, but Robert had always believed in paying for quality construction. The house on Elm Street felt different now. Robert had changed the locks, donated most of Teresa's belongings to charity, and had the place professionally cleaned. He'd also had security cameras installed, not because he feared Teresa or David, but because he'd learned the importance of documenting everything. Lily was thriving despite everything she'd been through. Her grades hadn't suffered, her college applications were strong, and she'd started seeing a therapist who specialized in family trauma. She'd also started dating Alex Durham, a senior from her AP history class, who treated her with the kind of respect Robert demanded from any boy interested in his daughter. The business was thriving, too. Word had gotten around Oakwood about Robert's divorce situation, and while some people whispered about his methods, everyone agreed that he'd been wronged. His phone had been ringing constantly with new contracts from people who appreciated a man who didn't let others take advantage of him. 6 weeks after the sentencing, Robert was working late in his office when his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. Robert Hayes. Mr. Hayes, this is Beatrice Monroe. I hope you don't mind me calling. Robert leaned back in his chair. He'd had minimal contact with Beatrice since their collaboration in destroying their respective spouses. Not at all. How are you doing? Better than expected, honestly. The divorce was finalized last week. David gets nothing, obviously. I kept the house, the money, and my dignity. I'm glad to hear it. I'm calling because I wanted to thank you and to let you know that I'm leaving Oakwood. Robert wasn't surprised. Oakwood was a small town with a long memory. Beatrice would always be known here as the woman whose husband had cheated with a student's mother. Where are you heading? Colorado. I have some family there, and I've always wanted to try living in the mountains. I thought you should know that if you ever need anything. A reference. A favor. Whatever. You can count on me. I appreciate that, Beatrice. Robert, I want you to know that what we did, I don't feel guilty about it. They made their choices and they lived with the consequences. That's how the world should work. After she hung up, Robert sat in his office, thinking about consequences and new beginnings. Teresa and David were discovering that actions had permanent repercussions. Their comfortable assumption that Robert was too trusting, too decent, or too weak to fight back had been their fatal mistake. People in Oakwood now knew that Robert Hayes was not a man to cross. His employees worked harder, his suppliers delivered on time, and his competitors kept their distance. It wasn't fear exactly. It was respect for someone who finished what he started. That night, Robert had dinner with Lily at their kitchen table. The same table where they'd eaten thousands of meals as a family. But this wasn't the same family. This was better. Honest, built on a foundation that wouldn't crack under pressure. Dad, Lily said as they finished eating. I've been thinking about Mom. Robert set down his fork and gave his daughter his full attention. What about her? Do you think she'll ever try to contact us when she gets out? Robert considered the question carefully. She might try, but Lily, you need to understand something. The woman who raised you and the woman who planned my murder are the same person. People don't change their fundamental nature. They just reveal it over time. So what do we do if she tries to come back? Robert's smile was warm, but his eyes were steel. We remember that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt, and we protect what we've built here. Lily nodded, understanding. At 17, she'd learned lessons about trust, consequences, and self-protection that some people never learned. Robert was proud of her strength, even as he regretted the circumstances that had created it. Later that evening, as Robert sat on his front porch looking out at the neighborhood he'd helped build, his phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. Robert, this is David. I get out next month. We need to talk. There are things you don't know about Teresa. Things that happened before you married her. Things that might change how you feel about everything. Robert read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. David Monroe still didn't understand that it was over. He was still trying to manipulate, still trying to find angles and leverage points. Robert Hayes had learned to recognize rotten foundations when he saw them, and he'd learned that sometimes the only solution was complete demolition. He turned off his phone and went inside to check on Lily, who was doing homework at the kitchen table. She looked up when he entered, and her smile reminded him of why he'd fought so hard to protect their future. Some structures were worth saving. Others needed to be torn down so something better could be built in their place. Robert Hayes was very good at knowing the difference. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. See you next time.